What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I want to continue to examine 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. Now, Curtis Anderson and myself chose Joe Brown. Now, Joe Brown was known as Old Bones. And why they would give him that name? Because it wouldn't be until after 15 years of his professional career that he would finally get a lightweight championship title shot. And he would accomplish that feat by defeating Wallace Bud Smith. Wallace Bud Smith would defeat Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter would defeat Ike Williams. Now, Joe Brown was born May 18, 1926 in New Orleans, Louisiana. He would die December 4th, 1997. He was just 71 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting Joe Brown. Had great conversations with him. But he was a master boxer. Great jab. Great foot movement. And he knew how to tie his man up on the inside if need be. Joe Brown stood 5'7.5" and he would have a 68-inch reach. He fought from 1941 to 1970. Within his career, with a total bouts of 185 fights, 121 wins, 47 losses, 55 knockouts, and he'd be stopped himself 11 times. Joe Brown would find himself in the ring with Buster Tyler. He would have a draw with Tyler. Tyler was a club fighter. He would defeat Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter was the only 3-time lightweight champion in boxing history. And he would become champion when he would knock out Ike Williams in 14 rounds in 1951. Joe Brown would also be in the ring with Sandy Sadler. He would lose to Sadler, but Sadler's most recognition would be the 4-fight series that he would have with Willie Pep. Joe Brown would also find himself in the ring with Arthur King. He would win one and lose one. Freddie Dawson, who he would lose to. He would defeat Luther Rawlings and lose to John L. Davis. He would defeat Charlie Williams and Lester Felton. He would defeat Virgil Akins. He would win 2 and lose 1 to Virgil Akins. Now, Virgil Akins would lose to Don Jordan in the final eliminator of the welterweight championship division. And Carmen Basilio would vacate that title. He would move up to the middleweight division to get a crack at Sugar Ray Robinson's title. But in that tournament, you had fighters such as Rory Calhoun. You would have Virgil Akins and Don Jordan. You would also have Benny Kid Paret, as well as Vince Martinez. A slew of great fighters challenging for that title. But Joe Brown would also be in the ring with Teddy Red Top Davis, Wallace Bud Smith, Tommy Campbell, who he would win 1 and lose 1. He would win 10 and lose 2 to Tommy Campbell. But the upset happened in 1951 when Tommy Campbell would defeat Joe Brown. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a history on Tommy Campbell. His name was the Chocolate Ice Cube. And he was born August 25th, 1920 in Kansas City, Kansas. He would die June 13th, 1969 in Black Island, Illinois. He fought from 1946 to 1951. He had a total bout career of 64 fights, 46 wins, 22 knockouts, 12 losses, and he was stopped 4 times himself with 6 draws. He would have 11 straight wins, October 17, 1946. And he would take on Gene Burton. He would lose in 9 rounds to Gene Burton. He would lose by knockout at the Rainbow Arena in Chicago. He would also take on Bolton Ford, Ocean Park Arena, Santa Monica. He would defeat him in 10 rounds. He would fight twice against a fighter by the name of John L. Davis. He would take on Art Aragon, who was the original Golden Boy in California. Rudy Cruz fought him twice. Enrique Bolanos, who he would lose to. Now, Enrique Bolanos would have 3 fights with Ike Williams. And there would be some controversial matches. And many thought that Enrique Bolanos had defeated Ike Williams. He found himself in the ring with Freddie Dawson and Johnny Gonzalez, as well as Lester Felton. But Joe Brown will lose his crown in 1962, April 21st to be exact, against a Puerto Rican lightweight who I knew personally, and his name was Carlos Ortiz. He would be the first Puerto Rican lightweight champion in boxing history. That fight took place in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I got news for you. Carlos Ortiz was a hell of a fighter. But he would also take on Sandy Saddler, May 2nd, 1947. He would lose to Sandy Saddler in his hometown, Louisiana, New Orleans. And Joe Brown would also take on Jimmy Carter, April 18th, 1947. He would defeat him in 10 rounds in New Orleans, Louisiana. But on December 3rd, 1948, he would lose 4 rounds by knockout over Johnny Bratt. Joe Brown would be entered in 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. And Joe Brown would be the only 12th title defense champion. That record would be broken by Roberto Duran. Joe Brown would retire at the age of 42. He'd be entered into the Boxing Hall of Fame in 1996. He was something else. He fought other fighters such as Kenny Lane and Orlando Zulueta, Ralph Dupas, Battling Torres, Ringer Thompson, and Charlie White, Leonard Caesar, and Francis Adams. What a fighter was Joe Brown. Thanks for listening. Joseph Sandy Sadler was born June 23rd, 1926 in Boston, Massachusetts. He died September 18, 2001. He was 75 years of age at the time of his death. He stood 5 foot 8.5 and he would have a 70-inch reach. Within this career, with a record of 163 total bouts, 145 wins, 104 knockouts. He would have 16 losses with 2 draws. Now, Joe Sandy Sadler fought from 1944 to 1956. I met Sandy Sadler. His locker was next to my dad's in Stillman's gym. They used to walk home. Well, they walked to the train station from Stillman's gym. And then Sandy Sadler would get off at his exit and my dad would get off at his. And my dad was living in Patterson Projects on 168th Street. And Sandy Sadler was staying at a location. But Sandy Sadler, one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. And he would retire undefeated as featherweight champion. Now, he would become featherweight champion when he would defeat Willie Pep, September 26, 1951, at the Polo Grounds. The fight was scheduled for 15 rounds. But Sadler would defeat Willie Pep in 9 rounds. And they would meet each other 4 times. Ray Miller, who was the referee in the last fight, would report to the State Athletic Commission that he was hurt in that fight because of the roughhouse play between both men. But Willie Pep was stated to have initiated the knockdown of a referee. And so Willie Pep would lose his license in the state of New York. And then he would eventually testify about the scandals that would take place in the game of boxing during his time. Because it was said that Willie Pep had took a dive with a fighter by the name of Lulu Perez. Went out 3 times. And it was rumored in the arena that that would happen. The State Athletic Commission went to the locker room of Willie Pep and warned him. We understand that you're going to be taking a dive. If we find out that you do, you will be suspended. And Willie Pep went down 3 times. Along with the complaints of referee Ray Miller, they decided to suspend the license of Willie Pep. Now, Sandy Saddler would also become the junior lightweight champion when he would defeat Diego Sosa, February 28, 1951, in Havana, Cuba. Tuesday, March 21st, 1944, Saddler was knocked out in 3 rounds over Jack Leslie. He KO'd Leslie in 3 rounds. And the fight took place at the Auditorium in Hartford, Connecticut. The referee was Johnny Clooney. Now, he would lose to Phil Terranova, July 23rd, 1946. Would take on Little Flashy Lorte, Gaby Lewis, Joe Brown, Jimmy Carter. Now, he drawed with Jimmy Carter. And he would defeat Joe Brown and Gaby Lewis. But he would win 1 and lose 1 to Willie Pep. He would defeat Baby, they called him Patty DeMarco. And he would defeat Charlie Riley out of St. Louis. Now, Sandy Saddler was an outstanding fighter, and he deserves to be on this list. 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. One quick note. Sandy Saddler will lose eye vision. And the thumbing of Willie Pep. Now, it states that he lost eye vision because of a car crash accident. Sandy Saddler told my dad, and he told me as well, he really got that damage from the thumbing of Willie Pep. But he wanted somewhat of a settlement, if you will. So thanks for watching. Scrapbook Boxing, Curtis Anderson. 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. Harold Dad, born March 24th, 1923, Chicago, Illinois. He died July 17th, 1962. He was just 39 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in his hometown, Chicago, Illinois. Now, Howard Dad stood 5 foot 5 inches. He had a 68 and a quarter reach. Fought from 1942 to 1955. Within his career, with 76 total bouts, 38 wins, 32 losses, would have 8 knockouts, and he was stopped 4 times with 6 draws. Let me explain to you about Howard Dad. Now, the reason why I'm even talking about Howard Dad, I can't place him on 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters. He didn't take the game seriously. Because had he done that, you would know who Howard Dad was. But Howard Dad was a hell of a fighter. A very, very good fighter. He'd outbox these guys in the gym. Guys that you know of all the time, with no problem. But he didn't take the game serious enough. And he would have losses. And those losses didn't really mean much to him. When you think of Emmanuel Burton, Emmanuel Augustus, and some other fighters who you know have the potential, but they're just in there for a payday. They come in to entertain. They called in by the promoters last minute. And that's how Howard Dad was. And I'm not taking anything away from his performances, but his talent was outstanding. He just didn't show up and give it his all. So Howard Dad, he would win the World Bantamweight Championship fights when he fought a fighter by the name of Manuel Ortiz. Fought him January 6, 1947. And Ortiz had a record of 75 wins, 13 losses. He would have 3 draws. And Manuel Ortiz was a Mexican fighter out of California. And he was fighting for the NBA Bantamweight Championship title. Fought him at the Civic Auditorium. And he would defeat him in 15 rounds. Now, Howard Dad would become the 4th black bantamweight champion of all times. First, you would have George Dixon. And then you had Panama Al Brown. Then Georgie Pace, 1940. And Georgie Pace would have his problems with Lou Salica. And Salica would have his problems with Manuel Ortiz. But Howard Dad would become the bantamweight champion of the world. But on March 11th, 1947, he would lose to then 75-14-3 Manuel Ortiz at the Olympic Auditorium, Los Angeles, California. And he would lose his NBA bantamweight championship strap in 15 rounds. Friday, September 2nd, 1949, he would fight Sandy Sadler, who would have 100 wins with 7 losses. And Sandy Sadler would defeat Howard Dad at the Chicago Stadium in 10 rounds. It would be for a charity event. But then Howard Dad would lose to Percy Bassett. Now, Percy Bassett was out of St. Louis. Percy Bassett was an outstanding fighter. He would lose to Laura Solis and Willie Pep, Jackie McCoy, Charlie Riley, Manuel Ortiz. I just wanted to give some exposure to Howard Dad because he was a really good fighter. But unfortunately, I cannot place him on the list of 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. But as quiet as it's kept, Howard Dad would be champion today. He would beat a lot of these bantamweights and perhaps lightweights today because he was that good of a fighter. And just unfortunately, he just didn't come around when he should have came around. So shout out to Howard Dad. Louis Powell, better known as Battling Siki, born September 16, 1897. St. Louis, Senegal, French, West Africa. He died December 15, 1925, in the lower east side of New York. He would hang out in Hell's Kitchen. He'd be harassed by the police. But Battling Siki had a lot of energy and didn't use his time wisely. But as a fighter, he would have 88 total bouts with 60 wins, 31 knockouts, 24 losses, and he'd be stopped 4 times with 4 draws. He served in the corporal forces in World War II, or World War I actually, in 1919. 1913, he would have some really good fights. He would take on Lee Anderson, who would become the colored light heavyweight champion, but he would lose to Lee Anderson. He would take on Paul Berlenbach, who he would lose to. Dixie Kid, Homer Smith, Tut Jackson, and Kid Norfolk. He would lose to all those fighters. He would lose to Mike Mateague, but he would defeat George Compartier. He would knock out George Compartier on September 24, 1922, at the Velodrome in Buffalo and Paris. And when he knocked out George Compartier, he stopped him in 13 rounds to become the world light heavyweight champion. The Battling Siki stood 5 foot 10.5 inches. He had a 75-inch reach. He would lose his light heavyweight championship crown to Mike Mateague in Dublin, Ireland, 1923. Mike Mateague was Irish, and it just made it that much more interesting because he would lose to him on St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. His last 24 pro fights were in America. The Battling Siki would be the first black light heavyweight champion in boxing history. And he'd be placed on this list of 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times. I want to give a shout out to Battling Siki. Just wish he was a little bit more subdued. But as a fighter, he brought it. Davey Moore. He was known as the Springfield Rifle. Born November 1st, 1933, Lexington, Kentucky. He would die March 23rd, 1963, in Los Angeles, California. You see, Davey Moore would unfortunately die in a ring. Shout out to Davey Moore. He stood 5 foot 2.5 inches. And he weighed anywhere between 123.5 to 135 pounds. He would end his career with a total bout of 68 fights, 59 wins, 30 knockouts, 7 losses, and he was stopped twice with 1 draw. He was very savvy with neutral skills, punching power. He would win a 1952 Olympic Games as a bantamweight. He would become the featherweight champion, but he would suffer brain injury, defeated Laura Solis and Hogan Kid Bassie, where he had his problem with Hogan Kid Bassie. He'd be in the ring with Cisco Andrea, Charlie Riley, and Frankie Valdez. Jose Luis Castillo and Danny Valdez. Be in the ring with Gil Godelli, who was another good fighter. He would lose the WBC and the WBA featherweight championship belt. The Sugar Ramos, Los Angeles, California. He would lose in 10 rounds. They fought at the Dodger Stadium, Los Angeles, California. And Sugar Ramos was 21 years old. Davey Moore was 29 years old. Ramos stood 5'4.5". He had a 66-inch reach. He had a record coming into that bout with 38 wins, 1 loss, with 29 knockouts. As for Moore, he stood 5'2.5". He had a 65-inch reach. And he walked into that ring with a record of 59 wins, 6 losses, and 30 knockouts. But Davey Moore must be added to this list of 150 greatest fighters of all times. In behalf of Curtis Anderson and Scrapbook Boxing, we would like to leave you with a list of great fighters to think about. Thanks for watching this series as we continue to add great fighters to the list of 100 years of the greatest 150 black fighters of all times.